Imagine two hills, one barren and one filled with trees. If someone asked you, which do you prefer, what would you say? One of those hills represents Western Washington, where the Cascade Mountains concentrate most of the state's moisture, and one represents the semi-arid region of Eastern Washington. Your answer, whether you prefer the trees or the openness, says something about your personality. Preference for the trees represents a desire for safety or refuge, and preference for visibility far and wide represents the desire to explore or prospect. And maybe it goes so far as influencing what side of the state you live in. Jay Appleton discusses his prospect refuge theory in his book, The Experience of Landscape. The theory explains our environmental preferences driven by evolution that selected our desires for prospect and refuge. I haven't read the book because it's been out of print for some time, and if you Google it, you'll see it costs hundreds of dollars now. I have, however, read 6 Matt Ridley books, and he talks about the evolution of everything. It's not just our genes that have evolved, but all facets of our culture, such as morality, technology, money. We can witness technology evolving before our eyes, but for most others, the changes are slow and incremental. So it's not so obvious within a single generation that they have evolved. However, our practices have been selected among competing ideas because institutions want to survive and replicate just like our genes do. Behaviors have also been selected over time. Those of us with the most useful or beneficial behaviors survived. I want to talk a bit about how this works physiologically as I understand it. We demonstrate some behaviors because of our brain's reward system, powered by dopamine. Dopamine is felt as desire, and so it pushes us to achieve pleasure sensations. Pleasures can be signaled to us by a suite of hormones and peptides, but the dopamine ensures that we come back for more. And so it's no surprise when we learn that it's released when we perceive food and sex, because we tend to exert a lot of effort to achieve those things over and over. It also contributes to why we have evolved certain physical features. Female humans, in case you didn't notice, don't get big red asses when we ovulate. And maybe that's because before amazing medical care, we sought to avoid pregnancy because it would kill us 50% of the time. So it was really important that we seek out sex for the pleasure of it, but we're intelligent enough that we could avoid sex during big red ass time. So we also needed hidden ovulation, in addition to the reward-seeking behavior, to trick us into reproducing. In experiments, when rats are starving but deprived of dopamine, they will die with the food sitting right in front of them. They can learn where to find food, and they can experience food tasting good without the dopamine because hunger signals and the liking of food are more controlled by other chemical messengers. But without the dopamine, they just don't have the motivation to walk just a few inches to eat. And it's not just in obtaining food, they fail to engage in any goal-directed behaviors without dopamine. Next, think about what defines a beautiful person. Someone who's healthy looking, clear skin, symmetrical. You've probably heard before that a female with youth, curvy hips, and big boobs is beautiful because it signals to us that she's fertile, which tells our genes, ooh, this is how I can replicate. Why do we like colors so much that companies put nasty artificial colors in our food? Because we evolved to have color vision to identify ripe fruits in nature. And so we find those products appealing. Why do we like ponds and other water features? Not just the visual, but the sound of water, like a creek, and want them in our landscape design. Because that's our water source, and we needed to live by water to survive. Why do I like my spring-fed cistern where the water is just below the ground? Well, I can access water if the grid goes down. Two examples of evolution that Matt Ridley missed are the diet evolution, which is also the title of a book that I thoroughly enjoyed, and our design preferences explained by the prospect refuge theory, unless it's somewhere in a book of his that I haven't read yet. Humans seek out to satisfy an innate desire when reviewing a space. According to the theory, we seek to have opportunity while being safe. To survive, the predator must be able to see its prey without being seen. So we have a tendency to prefer places with views that allow us to observe our surroundings, to acquire visual information, to explore environments and find opportunities. Those are prospects. And we also seek shelter, protection, areas to hide and retreat, withdraw, and have privacy. Those are places of refuge. For thousands of years, we've evolved what's an advantage for hunting as well as protection from enemies. It manifests, or we feel it, as psychological comfort. Most people aren't consciously thinking about running, hiding, or fighting. We think about what looks more comfortable and inviting. Prospect and refuge plays a major role in driving the sequential journey, since desire, aka dopamine, is the basic human emotion at work. Prospect space incites us to explore. Refuge space incites us to relax, to read. Examples of prospect are a distant vista, especially with mountains, oceans, and lakes, even an open sky, which you can get from the top of a hill where there's no obstruction of your view. In design, it could be any large open space or a view into the space around an object like a fountain or a winding pathway which draws your eyes to it and makes you curious what's around the corner. Examples of refuge are forests, of course, but also caves where you have enclosure on 3 sides and a complete ceiling. The refuge provides shade, making you less noticeable to predators, and also protects you from temperature extremes. In design, it could be any interior space, a bench with a wall behind, or any object you can hide behind. A big tree near your house reinforces the house is a safe place. Remember, Bob Ross was never satisfied with his paintings unless he put big trees in them. We also like arbors. When the vines fully climb over my arbor, that will become a safer space, more hidden from the road. Where we get a balanced combination of both prospect and refuge, that's where we get the most satisfaction. Woodlands and hills also offer a tactical advantage in times of conflict, making the space more defensible. Under the canopy, you can move around unseen. At a high point, you can get views both below and all around to see danger approaching. Invaders also have to expend more energy to move up. In design, alcoves, windows, and doors connect an interior refuge space that would otherwise isolate us with exterior open space. If you happen to be staying at a hotel that, let's say, has a covered balcony with a view of a lake, that's going to make you think, I want to put that in my house. When you look at people hanging out outdoors at a public spot, they tend to be sitting at the edges rather than in the middle of a lawn. They seek the refuge of a bench, tree trunk, or concrete wall while keeping a prospect of the remainder of the space. People are also psychologically influenced by the relative strengths and weaknesses of the prospect refuge elements. They will stay longer in a strong refuge space that has a weak prospect element, and will leave the refuge more readily to explore if the prospect has a greater strength. Here's underneath the deck. So I never got rid of these guys because I felt bad and I thought that they would reuse them. Like they've been up here for so long that they've composted. Okay, let's see if I can keep myself from dying. Check out this bird's prospect and refuge. So it's underneath this deck. Here's one with a big nest. And it can look out. There's a little weed growing out of it. what robins love doing is they love picking out little bugs from the wood chips and little worms. This is what makes a photograph attractive, is you make the person feel like they're under a refuge, so they have something close that's framing it. It gives it this kind of perspective like, ooh, I'm safe here, but then I can see out. Oh yeah, look at all those bugs down there. So I learned recently that you are not supposed to let these compost, because who'd have thunk that birds don't like nesting in their crap. I feel like this evil person. It's like all soil. I feel like I'm King Kong. Destroy! And I've been wondering why they didn't come back last year. But you can be on the deck and peek through here and see their little blue eggs in here in the little mouths. Oh my god, there's a cutworm in there. How the heck did a cutworm climb up my deck? I'm gonna grab these other guys. But I'm gonna put the camera down so I don't die. There it is, it's all cleaned up. It is March 23rd, I think. I'm gonna see if it's too late for them to come back and build new nests. And this is what their compost looked like. I had never cleaned them out before. And I'm gonna leave this here in case they want to reuse some of the uncomposted little stickies. So here we are at one of the edges of the woodlands. And there's a terrace that was cut out here. And I'm showing this because there's a view of Mount Rainier right there. So this represents Prospect, and this represents Refuge. And so this is such a nice spot that gets me to think, oh, I should put a table here, and in the summer come up when there's guaranteed views of the mountain. This is a very comfortable spot because of the balance between those two features. It's even right next to this tree right here. So, and that would also cast shade in the summer when the mountain is mostly visible. So where I'm standing would be like an awesome place, like a sitting area. I can see my house. I can see the private road down there. If there was danger, I could, I would scope it out and I would notice them before they noticed me. And so you feel really safe up here, elevated with a bird's eye view of all the different features. You can see my neighbor's house. And I'm nestled up against the woods so I can flee to the top of the hill. It's kind of up there. And so I'm kind of, I'd say more than halfway up this hill. It's just a beautiful view up here, except Bob Ross wouldn't like that this tree doesn't have a friend. So we are back 6 months later. It is now the end of September. And so now we're looking at what the birds rebuilt. And what we can see here is a complete nest and then what looks like a partial nest. I was monitoring the birds from above, so I know this was used more than once. But here we see a nest that is fresh this year. It still has some dirt in it, so I don't know if it's partially composted or if the birds brought dirt into it. And then let's look at this partial nest. Now this is interesting. I want to talk about this a little bit. So I don't remember exactly where I read it, but bird nesting is a result of sequences of discrete, organized motor actions. What that means is that they're not like humans. They don't have a very strong memory. They don't do like long-term planning. You know, they have bird instincts where they know that, oh, this looks like a nice area. It has prospect and refuge, whatever. And it holds a memory that it sort of looks like this. Like it has this wood here and the distance between these two pieces of wood, you know, and the general area. So they can hold on to that, and they partially they learn, and partially they're born with the ability of how to build a nest. So they go and they get the material and they take it to the location that they've scouted. And so let's say so this one is probably where they started building. And as they take multiple trips back and forth, they don't necessarily remember that they had already started here and that they're X way through the process. So they start bringing sticks over here because it's in the same area and it looks the same. It looks identical. So as they're building the nest, they're bringing the sticks in both locations, and then they just finished that one first. And so that was a complete nest, and then that one wasn't finished because there was no point to it.